intentional groups and you'll leave here transformed. So Robert Stephenson, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now that pressure's been lifted, I can do this. So thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to have so many people in the room and here to kind of hear what we're going to talk about and join us on this journey. So one of the things I want to really start off with is that this is a thought in process. So a lot of the time when I do these sorts of talks, I've had an idea and I've gone and read some stuff and I pulled some stuff together and I go, this is what I think. And I put it together and I lay it all out and then I present it to people. But while I've been looking at this work, this notion of thresholds, new ideas keep coming up. And every time I sit down to write it, I write it a little bit differently. And at one point I just had to decide that I had to accept that this was a growing thought. So I kind of invite you to share this thought with me as we go through it today and just kind of see what comes up and see where we land. Is that okay? Yes. Cool. All right. So I have a question for you to get us started, really. And I'd just like to turn to the person beside you or behind you and just for a minute or two, just think about this notion of, well, what is a threshold? When you hear that word, what comes to mind for you? So let's just take a minute just to talk to the person beside you about what is a threshold. And when we come back, I'll ask you to shout out some of your thoughts. Let's just take a minute to do that. Off you go. When I think about the word thresholds, there is a space that we go past or beyond. So I thought about, the concept of a doorway, and we step over that threshold. So we leave one room and we go into another room. And that notion for me of how we go from one space to another space, what is in that space that we've experienced, that we're moving into another space, and how stepping over that threshold might be easy or hard. And what is in that other space that we're entering into. Sometimes we're entering into an unknown. And I think one of the things that becomes really challenging when we think about our clients and them stepping over that threshold is they are stepping into their unknown space. So they don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes that can make it really, really challenging. I think there's this other thought that I have as well about how when we get close to a threshold, it's like the air or the water gets thicker and harder to move through. So if we're swimming along and we're getting close to our threshold, it gets really difficult. We're not water anymore, it's soup or it's some kind of a gloop. And that's why we can notice that some of our clients, as they get close to making that change or becoming different or being different, they step back. And they choose not to go there because it becomes too difficult to push through or push over that edge. And one of the things I think we do as coaches is we support going over that edge. We support when things get difficult and gloopy and hard. And I think we can tie that into that notion of when our clients come to work with us, sometimes they think that the thing they are going through, they're the only person going through that thing. And when we can have discussions with them about that, we've had other clients or there are other people out there in the world that have gone through that challenge, they can go, oh, then it's possible. So it's okay to step or possible to step over that threshold and to achieve that thing that they want to achieve. So I started thinking about, so there's these thresholds, these things that we step over, these spaces that we move through, but why do them? Why put ourselves through that pain or that anxiety to make it happen? And one of my thoughts was that, well, we're humans and we grow. So we grow through these stages. We have these events that take place in our lives and they're just kind of inevitable. So the thresholds are going to be there anyway. And so there's something about how do we choose to deal with those thresholds? How do we choose to relate to those thresholds? How do we choose to have an experience with that threshold, whether it's good or bad? So it all, not all comes down, naughty, but it comes down to this notion of, well, what is a threshold? How do I deal with that threshold? What's my threshold? How do I deal with it? How do I experience it? And how do I get support to experience it? As opposed to how do I run away from it? But recognizing that we sometimes do run away from those thresholds and that that's kind of okay in its own way as well. So what I was thinking about this talk, and I was thinking about thresholds and this notion of this space that we get to, that we have to cross over, I was like, well, who's brought me to to this thinking. And to start off with, I thought of Joseph Campbell and the notion of our hero's journey and the quest and that first threshold that we step through to go off and become Neo, to become the one. I was like, oh, there's something quite exciting about the notion of that threshold. But I also recognize that Campbell talks about how we sometimes don't take up the quest, how we step away or we walk away from that quest. So I can recognize that sometimes clients won't take on that journey. They'll come to it, they'll understand it, they'll notice it's there, but they'll choose not to go on that quest. And I kind of have to be okay if they've chosen not to do that. There's also the work of Drake, and he talks about the thresholds that we go through as we go from one space to another. And he talks about that we don't push our clients through this space. We notice when they're at the edges of those thresholds, and we help them over the edge. We guide them or support them through that space. And so as coaches, we kind of can take on this idea that we are nurturing, we are supporting of our clients when they reach that difficult point so that they can step over into that new space. And there's some stuff I'll talk about a little bit later on about how we might be able to do that. And then I came across Erickson. And what was really interesting for me is I hadn't really heard much about Erickson. But I was having a conversation with Nick about this talk. And he said, oh yeah, that's the work of Erickson. I was like, oh, Erickson, who's this person? I'll go and have a look. And I started to look at it and I was like, oh, this brings on a whole new set of thinking. I thought I knew what I was talking about, but now I found this, a whole nother doorway has opened up to me. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to share. And this is why it's a thought in process and not a fulfilled thought or a finished thought, because I don't know what I'm doing with it just yet. I've got some ideas, which I'll share, but not all of the ideas. And then there's Nick Bolton, the thoughts of Bolton. He gets a full stop. And I think what I really found as I was looking at this work was, a lot of us know that Nick comes from a very existential space. And being around Nick, you kind of hear that existential language and you come to recognize what it might represent for you. And as I was researching this talk, I started to notice these existential questions showing up. And it made me kind of go, okay. So there's me thinking about the space that we go through, that there's this space, there's this now, there's the challenge that we have and how we step over and face that challenge. But there's also the existential questions that we ask ourselves, that we explore as we move through our lives. So I'm going to use Erickson to kind of frame this talk, whilst also exploring some of those existential questions that come up. Erickson talked about there were these 8 stages that we go through, and he talked about them in a kind of a linear fashion, but I'm not sure that they are linear. I recognize that some of them start off in childhood, and as we grow up, we experience different things. But one of the things that I think happens is whether we experience it and we go through it well or not, it kind of exists in us, and it can show up at any time, and it's about how we deal with it when it shows up that becomes interesting, that becomes exciting, and becomes the work that we do as coaches. Are you with me so far? Awesome. Okay, so Erickson talks about baby and infancy, and this notion of trust versus mistrust. And how as a baby, when we are born, we kind of sit there, well, not to start with anyway, and everything is done for us. The world happens around us. And we can therefore grow this sense of trust in the world, that somebody's going to be there and they're going to support me and they're going to fulfill my needs. But for some of us, that doesn't happen. Our needs don't get met. They may not get met in a timely fashion, or well, or all of the time. And so we start to develop this mistrust. And so we start to ask this question of, can I trust the world? Is it okay out there in this world? And if we can trust the world, we start to develop hope. We go, when a new crisis happens or something different happens in my world where I don't have the skills, I can trust and I can hope that somebody in the world is going to come to me and they're going to help me go through this. But some of us don't go through that experience. So we have a mistrust in the world and we have this concern and worry that no one is going to be there for us. And that can happen for our clients as well. That they show up in this world or they show up at our coaching doorstep with this sense of mistrust. And that's why it can take so long sometimes for them just to begin to open up fully with the thing that they want to create or that they want to change, because they have this sense of mistrust in the world. And so they have to work out whether they can trust you or not. So therefore there's this point for us as coaches around how we show up the same time after time so our clients can trust us, so they can recognize that we will be there for them. Because perhaps somewhere in their world that somebody hasn't been there for them. So they don't know whether they can trust the world or not. Then we become a toddler and we start thinking about autonomy and shame. So autonomy, we start to do stuff for ourselves. We start to walk for ourselves. We start to go to the bathroom for ourselves. And when we're doing these things for ourselves, somebody might clap and say, well done, that was great, and we feel supported and wonderful. Or they might go, you missed the potty. And they make us feel ashamed of what we are doing and who we are being. And then we carry that shame with us. And it's really easy for us to almost forget that bit of shame that we had as a child and be an adult and not recognize where that might come from. Now, I'm not saying that we have to, as coaches, go back to the beginning and work with our clients from when they were children. I don't think we need to do that, but I think we need to recognize where it might have come from and help our clients notice where it might have come from. And help them also to build that sense of autonomy, of being able to do things for themselves and be okay about doing things for themselves. To recognize that they feel shame and to help them work with that shame so they can move forward having a happy life. One of the things that Erickson talks about is this basic virtue, this thing that we develop if we successfully navigate that stage of our life. And when that basic virtue is met, there is a positiveness about that, where we go through the world feeling well and okay. And when I think about that word okay, it reminds me of the sort of the transactional analysis stuff. You know, I'm okay, you're okay. And am I okay in the world? Do I feel okay in the world as I move through it? Or do I feel unokay? Do I feel shame? Do I feel mistrust? So we start to ask ourselves that question, is it okay to be me? Is it okay to be me? And our clients might turn up with that sense of, is it okay to be who I am and who I am being? And how do we explore that with them in a way that allows them to recognize that it is okay to be who they are? And if they want to make changes, that's okay too, but not to think of themselves as broken or shameful. And when we have that successful navigation of this part of our lives, we develop that self-confidence, that self-esteem, so we can be stronger as we move forward through our lives. And we can notice our clients that show up without that sense of confidence and without that sense of self-esteem, and how we can work with them to build that and develop that and grow that. And I don't think it just has to come from when we are a toddler, because confidence can be shaken at any point in our lives. And it's to recognize that if a client comes to us and they're not feeling confident, it doesn't mean because when they were 2, they missed the potty. It might be that something happened in their world that shook their confidence. And we can explore that with them and help them to grow and to develop that confidence. Then we get to the play age. We're at school, we're starting to do new things. We're starting to initiate games and play and be exciting, and life's wonderful. But there might be a sense of guilt with this. We might get told that that isn't right, that we are naughty, that we have misbehaved. We get told this in our adult life. We want to play, go out drinking, yay! And somebody turns around and goes, that's the bad thing, that's the wrong thing to do. And we have a sense of guilt. We develop this sense of guilt about what it is that we want to do and how we want to do it. So that kind of impacts on how we show up in the world. So we start to think about, is it okay to be me? Is that all right? Can I be me? Can I move? Can I act? Can I do stuff? Is this okay to do this in this world? Or is somebody going to tell me off? Am I going to be shut down in some way? Am I going to remove myself from the world because when I do these things, I feel guilt? And sometimes the guilt isn't given by somebody else. We're doing it ourselves. We're placing that sense of guilt upon ourselves. So how can we shift and move through that? And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And when we can have that initiative, when we can have those ideas, we can develop our own sense of purpose, our own sense of direction of where we want to go. So maybe we can notice as coaches when somebody isn't quite sure what it is that they want to do, perhaps there's a little bit of guilt around that. And perhaps we can work with that sense of guilt to help them really explore what it is that they want to do and to recognize that it's okay to do that thing that they want to do. So we're at school. And there's a really interesting thing that happens at school is we're taught stuff. And we can be good at that stuff or we can be not so good at that stuff. And when we're good at that stuff, we're industrious. We develop all of these skills and these ways of working. But then there are some of us who don't develop those skills or are not very good at school, and we begin to feel inferior. We begin to feel that we don't have the skills. So we begin to worry about whether we can make it in the world of people and things. We begin to question whether we can survive out there in this world because we can't develop those skills, or we don't have those skills, or we haven't learned things at the same pace as everybody else. And I can recognize this showing up with my clients. I can recognize this showing up with me. When I think about when I was back at school many years ago, and that notion that, I didn't have that skill set. I wasn't learning at the same rate as my peers. And I just felt inferior. You just feel rubbish. And what does that do? It makes you play up. It makes you find other ways to soothe that pain that you feel. So you mess around. You become the joker. You become the naughty one, or you become the sports person. But you try to find a way that makes you fit into the world, and to soothe that pain that you feel by not being able to do what everybody else is doing. So we develop a sense of competency if we work through this well. And if we don't work through this well, according to Erickson, it means that the next stage we're going to have trouble in as well, because we haven't gone through this stage well enough. But for me, I don't think it's about this stage and this stage and this stage and this stage. I think it's kind of all happening at the same time. And that there is this notion of, in order to be a full and round and healthy person, we need to explore all of this all of the time, not just one thing at a time. Well, we might explore one thing at a time, because if we try to do it all at the same time, we might explode. But this notion of we don't kind of do it, get all right with it, then do the next one, then do the next one, but we kind of have a look at them and go, all right, what am I choosing now? How am I going to explore that one? How am I going to explore that one? So I'm going to pause there and just allow you to take a few moments to have a chat with the person beside you. Just kind of go, what are you thinking right now? As we're going through this, what thoughts are coming up for you? What are you noticing within yourself, or perhaps what are you noticing about your clients? Okay, so let's have a look at another one. The notion of adolescence, identity and role confusion. Now, this is huge. This is just a big one here, because, whether we're adolescent or not, that idea of, well, who am I? It's just a really big question. Who am I? Who am I trying to be? Who am I trying to become? And what is the world telling me I'm supposed to be? If we just take a little snippet of this and we just think about body image, and we just think about that notion of, well, what is the world telling me my body image should be? And which bit of the world should I be listening to? Which magazine is right? And if you think about the advertisements that you're bombarded with all of the time about how you look and how you should look, and then we look at ourselves and go, I don't quite look like that. Does that mean there's something wrong with me? And do I need to change? What do I need to change? How do I need to change that? And that notion of what role am I supposed to follow? What role am I supposed to have? And how roles change over time. I think about my dad and the role that he took as the breadwinner and the man. That's what he did. He didn't actually go out and chop wood, but that sense of that's what you do as the man. And then him going, well, I'm confused with these other men that stay at home and look after the kids. Is that being a man, or is that being a man? Which one is it? So we have this notion of we don't know who we're supposed to be, or we're finding it hard to explore, who am I supposed to be? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, or who I am, or what I can be. So as a being, we're asking ourselves those questions. Who can I be? What can I be? Should I know? Shouldn't I know? There is a sense, or sometimes we notice when young people go, I want to be this, and they're very clear about what they want to be. There is a confidence and a groundedness that they might have. And then there are other young people that go, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to be. And sometimes we can feel that they're a bit flaky or a bit on a shaky ground. And when we accept that it's okay to not know what you want to be, you kind of go, oh, that's okay. A couple of years ago, my son said to me, oh, I don't quite know what I want to be when I grow up, Dad. Did you know what you wanted to be? And I said, I still don't know what I want to be. And he was like, oh, okay. Cool, I thought you were supposed to know. And I was going, yeah, I thought that too. But as you get older, you realize that's what everybody thinks. And so this notion of sometimes we don't know what our role is, but we have these battles with who am I supposed to be? What is my identity supposed to be? And so we have this challenge where it gets really hard to accept ourselves and others. So the fidelity, it talks about the ability to commit oneself to others on the basis of accepting others, even when they may be ideologically different. So this idea that things might be really different, but we can accept who different people are. And when we're okay with who we are, we can be okay with who other people are. And when we're okay with who other people are, we can be okay with who we are. But when we're not okay with ourselves, it can be really hard to be okay with the rest of the world. So that notion of how do we work with our clients so they can be okay with themselves? What might we need to do? What interventions might need to go in so they can do that? And I'm talking about our clients, but I also recognize that we need to do that for ourselves as well. Because we need to be okay in our own identity in the world, whatever that identity is, whatever we choose it to be. So our young adult, intimacy and isolation. I think this is where me and Libby were talking about earlier on about that, having sex and having babies. So we have this notion of, can we be intimate? Can we be intimate with others? Can we connect with others? Can we share and be around others and it be okay? Or is it damaging? Or is it hurtful? So we choose to isolate ourselves from the world. So we go out there into the world, we find somebody, we fall in love, they break our hearts, we go, the world is a bad place, it breaks your heart, so isolate yourself, don't go down that road. So our clients may show up in our coaching spaces wanting to develop a sense of intimacy, but having had a challenge in the world at some point, which is making them feel isolated, or they're choosing to isolate themselves in order to protect themselves. And we ask ourselves that question, can I love? Can I be loved? And I think it's a question that we often come back to is, am I okay to be loved? Am I good enough to be loved? Do I need to perform certain acts and have enough money, have enough power, have enough wealth in order for somebody to love me? Or can they love me just as I am? And can I love them just as they are? Or am I making little demands and expectations on what I want them to be in order to have that love with them? So this notion of how can we love ourselves and how can we love others and how can we be okay with that? How can we learn to love ourselves and notice the bits of ourselves that we don't quite love, that we wish we didn't quite do that thing, but how can we go, that's okay, because that's still a part of me and a part of who I am, and I can embrace that part of me and who I am and grow and develop and continue to move forward. So we're in adulthood. And we start to ask this question of, can I make my life count? Can I make my life count? And I think, for me, this is where a lot of my clients show up, where they're going, can I make my life count? Am I worthy? What am I going to do with my life? Am I important? Can I be important? Can I make a difference? And I think coaching is the ideal place where we start to explore, how do we make our lives count? Not necessarily for the outside world, but for ourselves. How do we make our lives count for ourselves? And how do we go about doing that? How do we go about making that happen so that we can live a life that is rich of experience and happiness and ideas and giving back to others? So we can care for ourselves, we can care for our families, and we can also care for society. So that bigger picture view, how do we get into that bigger picture? Maturity. Integrity versus despair. Is it okay to have been me? Now, I think we ask this question quite often, where we kind of go, what's past? Was that okay? Did I do that well? Was it okay to have been me? Have I succeeded in life? And I think one of the things that we do as coaches is we help our clients to recognize that it's okay to have been whoever you've been. And then we ask that question, and what do you want to be? What else do you want to be? What else do you want to do? What else do you want to give? How else do you want to grow? So we can explore that as well. As opposed to saying, nah, it wasn't okay to be you. That was a bit rubbish. That was a bit broken. Let's do something else. So we want to explore with our clients, how can we use that inner wisdom of the experiences that they've had to recognize it's okay to have been me. It's okay to have grown, to have developed, to have had those experiences and see what happens with them and where they turn up, and to be okay with that. A lot of us think we have to be something. We don't recognize that we're always being ourselves anyway. We're always doing ourselves anyway. We think, oh, there's something else I should be doing. What's that something else? We busy ourselves running around the world going, oh, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Because I've been told or I've heard that I need to be something. And what is that something? Instead of just going, oh, but it's being me. And how can I just be me? So when I sort of went through this, this work of Erickson's, these questions came up. And I was like, okay, so here are these questions. And are these questions just our life's questions? Are these just the questions that as we go through life, we can just ponder and we can just explore and see what happens? Are these the questions that sit at the root of any coaching interaction that we have? Now, we don't need to ask our client these questions, but we can hold them in our minds as a frame of our thinking. And some of those questions might be, oh, that's really small. Those questions might be, can I trust the world? Is it okay to be me? Is it okay for me to be, move, and act? Can I make it in the world of people? Can I make it in the world of people and things? I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, or who am I? What can I be? Can I be loved? Can I love? Can I make my life count? Is it okay to have been me? So when I think about those questions and I go, if I hold these questions lightly, when I'm exploring with my clients what's going on for them, what do they bring up for me? How do they help me to ask questions of my clients or to guide the areas that we might explore? How can I use these as little touch points to notice what might be going on for my client? Is my client showing up with the, can I be loved? Is that the question that they're fundamentally asking when they enter the coaching space? I don't need to ask them that, but I can hold that lightly in my mind so I can notice when that shows up so I can begin to explore it. Are they asking themselves, is it okay to be me? Have they always tried to be something else? And now they've got to a point where they're going, what is it? Can I just be me? Is it okay to just be me? And in our coaching, we can just explore that and sit with that and see what happens. And this is where I sort of chuckle to myself because I go, well, this feels like really existential thinking. But I don't see myself as an existentialist. Maybe it's not. But I kind of go, this feels like really big world thinking. But it also feels like real narrative thinking, real story thinking. That notion of the stories that we're living, you know, can we trust the world in this story that we're experiencing? Can we be okay as ourselves? Can we be loved? Can we make our life count? And what might we need to or want to do in order to make that happen? So before I share with you my thoughts about the role of the coach in all of this, I'm just curious what you think about what your roles might be as the coach when we're holding that sort of world and that language lightly. So let's just take a minute with our partner, having a chat about what you think your role of the coach might be with this sort of work. Just 1 minute, off you go. And I think you're really right, that notion of we need to understand it for ourselves. And I've gone through this talk today and I recognize I still don't understand this for myself. And I'm still thinking about it and experiencing it. And some of it I go, oh, I know that bit, I've done that work. And there are other bits I go, oh, okay, I need to go and think about that. And I think we, you know, not all of us, I was going to say all, but not all, but some of us might need to think about what can we look at in ourselves through this work and with this work. I'm just going to leave you some thoughts that I have around how we might work as a coach around this. And some of this is around experimentation. This notion of when our clients are going, is it okay to be loved? Is it okay to be me? Is it okay to do these things? Just to explore, well, how can we do little experiments to explore that and find out? Not necessarily let's go and fall in love with the first person we meet, but who is it okay to love? Who are the right people to share our love with? And how can we develop and we can grow that? So how can we do mini experiments around these notions with our clients to explore where these things exist, where it's okay, and how they can expand? How can we help them develop their own self-awareness? Through that listening, through journaling, through meditation, whatever that may be. But how can we support our clients in becoming aware of what is it that they are thinking and they are feeling, so that they can express it and they can look at it and they can work on it? How do we help our clients to accept themselves? How can we work with them to say it's okay to be me? It's okay to have done what I have done and to show up how I show up. And I think one of the things that we do is we witness the change. And through that witnessing of change in our clients, we can name that change and we can reflect that change. We can notice the journey that they've gone on. Even if it's a tiny journey with little baby steps, we can witness that and we can notice it and we can reflect it back to our clients so they can see that they are growing and they are developing. We can help our clients to enable meaning in their life, to recognize what their lives mean for them, to recognize what it is that they are doing, to notice and find and explore their own purpose so they can create meaning for themselves. And the last thing for me, I think, is to honor the courage that it takes for the client to show up in our space. Because it's not an easy thing to sit there with a coach and tell them where you think you are going wrong. Or about your stuff. So how can we honor that courage? But also, how can we as coaches be courageous and ask those difficult questions? And go to those difficult spaces with our clients so that they can really feel who they are and what they're going through and how they might want to deal with it. I don't believe that this is the complete list of thresholds that our clients may go through. I don't believe I can know all of that right now, or maybe ever. But we can still answer those questions. I think I'm just going to jump back to those life questions that I think can be really important to explore when we're working with our clients to help them notice the thresholds that they are at. When we're asking those questions, can I trust the world? If we go through a divorce, we're going to ask that question, can I trust the world again? Can I trust again? Can I love again? So it may be a different style of threshold, but I think these questions still come back within that. And it's that space where as a coach, we help support them trying those things out. So we don't go off into the world and experiment and let me know how it goes. Drop me an email and tell me how you're getting on. But we go, okay, what experiments might you try this week? Okay, and then next week we can look at those and we can see how you're getting on with that and see where we might need to go next and where we might need to pull back and where are the right places to experiment. I recognise that I presented it in a linear fashion and that's how Erickson's work is presented. But I don't think it's linear. I think life experience happens just in life. So it's not necessarily that this happens there and that happens there. So if we're working with somebody in their early 20s, they haven't done the maturity stuff. I think they may well have done. And so as coaches, it's that thing, we meet our clients where they are. Or we explore where they are right now and not have any preconceived ideas about where they might be and what might be going on for them. One of the things I think we do here at Animus is talk about enjoying being a coach and wanting to be a coach and wanting to make a difference with the people that we work with. And it isn't just a job. I was going to say it's a calling. That might be a bit strong. But I'll leave it in there anyway. There's this notion for me that we're not kind of starting here and moving along like this. Our whole life is happening all of the time. And it's that different energies or different elements or different challenges are popping up in different areas of our world, and we're dealing with those different areas. So it's not that I think, well, let me see if I can find the list that I want. No, I don't know where it is. Can't think where it is. But when we think about how we're going through our lives, right now, you may be really content financially, but your relationship might be in the space of, can I trust the world? So one of these might be okay, but the other isn't okay. So all of this is happening all of the time. So this is where, at the beginning, where I said we kind of want to look at all of it, but sometimes that feels like it's too much. But we kind of need to do that because it's all happening anyway. And so when we can kind of take our world, which is kind of there for me at the moment, we take our world and we go, right, let me look at all of my world and all of the different elements of my life at one point in time and just notice what's showing up. Notice where I need to do some work and where I don't need to do any work, where something is okay or where something needs to be addressed. Because I think we also, when we do a bit of work, it kind of pings out somewhere else. It's a bit like those weird jigsaw puzzles, that we do something and it affects something over there. We go, oh, look at that. Oh, okay, and we fix that and then something else pops up. And if we think that it's a linear thing where we go, I put all the blocks in place and it's okay, I think we're kind of missing what the kind of world is about or what life is, in my opinion. Because I think when you put the blocks down, as you put this one down, that one pings out over there, and we need to push that one in place and it pulls something else out of the other space. And so we can look at our lives, so we can, you can do something like a wheel of life, and you can notice where different aspects are sitting for you in your life and what you might want to do with that, but recognize that they all have a ripple effect on everything else. And so we don't do anything in isolation. I think that's where I'm going. We don't do anything in isolation. I think that's what it's about. We're never at one threshold. We're always at many thresholds, and we're kind of dealing with different thresholds at different times, and they're showing up and we're noticing, oh, there's that to deal with and there's that to deal with as well. And then some of those might be larger and more important or needing our attention more than the others. But life, I think, is about stepping through those thresholds, about dealing with them and looking at them and exploring them in order to have that kind of rich, fulfilling life that we want to live. Live? Live. Lead. Live, lead.
Leave.
Cool. Okay, so I think I'm going to close it for the evening there, but I'm going to be around forever. So if you want to continue this discussion, then please feel free to do so over in the barn. I'd like to really thank you all for coming out this evening and being part of this conversation and this continued thought. And I'm really curious as to where this thought might lead you, and I'm also curious as to where this thinking will lead and end up for me. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.